So what was at stake in these important years when Europe was created, in the decisive years of 47 to 57 until the Treaty of Rome? It was really a big dividing lines, and by the way, they are the same like today. So 1950, 17 years on, actually they are quite the same. And the big discussions which were happening in these circles of power in the Western European chancellors, in Bonn and in Paris and in Washington, and obviously also in Italy and in the Benelux countries, it was very much the dividing lines and the same pressures. There was the Soviet Union, and which was aggressive and wanted ultimately to take all of Europe. Nobody really wants to hear that today, but this was, of course, the main reason why Europe was ready for this form of unity. And without this threat of Soviet takeover and Russian aggression, Soviet aggression would not be possible. But that was the first, of course, the first role, and this is always the question about Russian and Soviet power in Western Europe. The second one was, of course, about the American role. America has withdrawn after First World War and wanted to withdraw in 45 as well. The planning was to go back and to be happy back in America. Will America leave Europe alone? Will America stay? What's the role of America in about a big decision about NATO or the European Defense Community? Ultimately, it was American-backed Western Europe which was established, and that was very contentious. Yeah, that is still contentious today and was contentious every single day, because from these big European powers, who really wants to be second-ranked in the shadow of Washington's decision? It's difficult, It's not easy for a proud nation like France to somehow understand that it's no longer a global power, which actually it wasn't since the Treaty of Paris, but not the 1920, but the 1763 Treaty of Paris, but that's okay, another issue. But this was the big dividing line. And how long will NATO be? Will it be a lasting organization? What's the situation with Imperial France, global ambition? France, colonial power in Indonesia, not Indonesia, in Southeast Asia, with Vietnam and with Cambodia and with Laos, Indonesia was still a very, it was a Dutch ambition, but that was, of course, very important. But the most important was the question of France, with its imperial ambition in the Middle East, in Africa, in South Asia, and obviously with its very limited capacity after World War II. It didn't have the fiscal or military capacity for being a global power anymore, didn't have it after the First World War anymore as well. And so the situation was, of course, very much the ambition for global power, not the capabilities, and how to fit then into the European context. And of course, again, was the question of a very big Germany surrounded by many smaller and medium powers and states. That is, of course, a big question then, and it is today. And of course, and that was the big question about Council of Europe, OECD on the one hand, the EU, that was between supranationalism and international cooperation. International cooperation simply being states working in organizations together. That was what one part of the American establishment wanted, and they have created the OECD for that. And the British wanted a Council of Europe, working together, but as normal states in a normal international platform, in a sense. But a part of the American elite and a part of the European elite, and here Jean Monnet's unique contribution comes to the play. They wanted a supranational. That means to have a kind of America as a union of states with a federal level which has its own powerful instruments. And this was the unique contribution, and that was, of course, the big battle of the day. Is that something anybody wants? The British obviously didn't want, that's why they didn't join. Later they wanted it, France has rejected it, so it was a very complicated battle. But this is the dividing line today. This is the dividing line why Britain has left, ultimately. The elite dividing line. When you follow the debates about the internal debates, the whole this debate about the court was not really understandable in the continent. Nobody has something against the rule of law or the European court in Europe. It's very rarely, yeah? But okay, some have, when you look at this battle between the German High Court and the European High Court just recently, so it's a contentious elite question, who is really the lord of the realm, if you want to say, or who has the trousers. That's of course a big question for the big states, much more than for the smaller and medium states. But you see it also in the Polish case, in the Hungarian case. It's a contentious and conflictual issue today. It was very much so in the year 50 or 57, yeah. And who pays, of course, and who gets prosperous, and how to reach North American level. Of course, that was the vision. You know, this elite of Europeans who were in charge of politics, they knew that a different world is possible just over the ocean. They thought about this, they dreamed about it, and they didn't really understand why there is so much poverty in Europe. And the question is obviously, can Europe be a continental union like the USA, or can we be similar, successful or prosperous? This was in Jean Monnet's mind ultimately. He was also an investment banker. He was very much aware about the prosperity differential between America and Europe, not only after the war and the destruction, but also in between the wars and also before. It was very clear. So Jean Monnet is important personality. I want to devote this video very much about him because I admire him very much. He is a great European statesman, the father of Europe, they called him. He was the first president of the high authority. Later they kicked him out, but nevertheless, you know, he was probably too ambitious in his supranationalism for some of the leaders of some of the states, especially his own state, France, didn't appreciate this one too much. But he was the key strategist for the unity of the West. Yeah. He was already in the armament procurement of the First World War, of the Second World War, and also very much involved in the victory of the West in terms of supplying and preparing the industrial needs of Western Europe in World War II. He was later an investment banker, and he was even very much a friend of Eastern Europe. So I can say he would really also support Ukraine, I hope so, when he would live today. And in his context, of course, that's so different. But he was supporting Poland, Romania, the new states. He was supporting China. He was really a very, very, very active and successful man. And he had this vision of a united Europe. And he was really pushing very much for that one. And he understood very much America. This is what is misunderstood often, because he really he was not a Euro-nationalist, yeah, to build Europe against America. No, he saw America, he understood why it works, he knew the American constitutional history very well, and he wanted similar success for the Europeans, with a EU court, with a EU commission, with EU law above here, national law, and all these very important supranational instruments. Yeah? So the 9th of May is also very much his day. Of course, it's now the Schuman Declaration Day, and Schuman was the French political leader who implemented all these things. But it was the driving intellectual and the lobbying force behind it was very much Jean Monnet. And what we have is his vision of a continental union. I would like to underline what that means, that we are still very much behind the USA prosperity level. They are at 62, we are at 36, yeah, $1,000 per capita. And with more unity, with more united, more federal European Union, we could be as rich as North America over time. I think it's a powerful vision. It's much more efficient to have a continental union, to be all united, a united labor market, united energy infrastructure, all these important things. If you can plan and implement things on a continental level, it's of course really much more economically efficient. And that's why it's also my vision, my proposals of a EU37, of a stronger, united, more powerful Europe, not against America, but built after the American idol and reaching American prosperity levels one day. I think that should be our vision, to be allied with America, with North America, prosperous in TTIP and secure in NATO, but definitely being similar rich. And I've called this the price of this unity in Europe. This unity has a real price. If you see that we have with Mexico together 500 million people living in North America, yes, you see North America on the map, yeah, and you have over there, and you have 700 million in Europe, in NATO and European trading system outside Russia. Russia, I don't count into that. It's a hostile nation. They attack us, so that's not part of Europe. In that sense, geographically partly, and maybe mentality-wise, and maybe there is a different future ahead. But at the moment, we have 700 million outside of Russia in Europe, and they produce exactly 21 trillion. And we have 24 trillion in North America with 500 million. So it's 200 million people less, and still they produce 3 trillion more. So imagine, you know, if we could reach the average GDP per capita of North America, including Mexico, yeah, and that's about 48,000. Yeah, so this 500 million at 48,000, and we 700 are producing on average 30,000, including Turkey, including the Balkans, including Ukraine. Yeah. If we could really unite so much, Ukraine included, make sure we have also a triple trading system like Canada, United States and Mexico, like with EFTA, EU37, CEFTA, you know, the customs union, all this kind of various, we have too many various, you know, the UK is unclear, you know, that's all a mess, yeah, and that's why we are poor. And if we could somehow get everybody a little bit more streamlined in a trading and economic sense at least, and not in a political sense, but, you know, working, cooperating in the internal market much more efficient, you know, imagine if we reach North American prosperity level at 48,000, that would add a whooping, you know, 12 trillion to the GDP from 21 maybe to 33. Trillion at today's dollars now compared to, okay, there's inflation, and also America will grow economically in the next years very much, so I'm confident, but you know, 12 trillion, and just the unity is the problem. And you know, when I say, I call it the 12 trillion lost question, the question of the lost 12 trillion, huh? Yeah, lost. The lost $12 trillion question, yeah, that we can call it, yeah. And you know, why are Europeans not as rich as Americans? Why are we now 17 years after the war still so much behind? On average is tracking, and the number, it's a whooping number, 12 trillion. The whole of the EU GDP with the UK is at 19. And I'm talking about 12 trillion missing dollars. And it's the unity. It's ultimately the unity. You know, it's not only taxation. Also, America has high taxations. They have reduced it, luckily, but still, it's not that, you know, it's so much higher than in Europe. Of course, you know, they have a less state to GDP ratio. Yeah, you know, they are more competitive and more free market and more deregulated. Yes, you know, but we have also European countries who are quite similar. It's, you know, we have a big diversity in Europe. The mentality, the entrepreneurship, there are thousands of issues which can be improved, and they can learn from us, we can learn from them, we can be a little bit more American, and they can be a little bit more European, and you know, we see that now in this health crisis, you know, we can all learn from each other. It's not that the American model is the only best and the European model is very bad. No, that's not rational, yeah. We also have great scientists, great innovators, you know, and of course they are ahead, yeah, but mostly because they are richer. And you know, then you have more capital, you have more educated people, because you are basically, the families have more money, they invest more in education. It makes a big difference if you are at 60,000 like the US, yeah, or if you are at 30,000, yeah. I mean, this is already significant. It's double the level, and that has a huge effect, yeah, on the lifetime of the people, on the ideas, and the access to capital. You know, it's quite logical. If you are much richer, you have more opportunities, yeah, and you have more access to capital, and it's a reinforcing circle, yeah. And very much the reason for that progress is that they were already much earlier united. Of course, that we cannot repeat so easily, but we can repeat the models of successful unification of Western Europe and of whole free Europe, I call it, yeah? Including Ukraine, including Turkey. Not all in the political process. I made many videos about that, you know. Everybody has a different role and situation. That we will never be as united as North America, but they also have Mexico, they have Canada, if you see it as a continent, yeah. They have free different trading systems, but they have this USMCA, this ex-NAFTA. You know, we will also always have EFTA, CEFTA, EU, maybe the customs union, maybe a different relation. But nevertheless, we have to really coordinate these things much better, be more open, have a pan-European labor market, a pan-European capital market, a pan-European energy market, a pan-European transport market, a pan-European digital market. It doesn't necessarily need everybody to sit in European Parliament or have a commissioner. No, that's not about it. But money, people, capital, goods, they must flow much more freer, cheaper and faster in Europe. That's the ultimate issue. The internal market must work much better. And we have to really reduce the friction between ideas, people, and goods, and all these internal barriers, mentally regulatory. That's the problem in the European continent. Yeah? And we have to ensure that all these poor periphery people, they are from ERP and from Ukraine especially, but also the Balkans, and they are allowed to work in Western Europe as well. And there's one big labor market where opportunity and freedom reigns, yeah? Not restrictions. Yeah? The Americans also do have to do more on Mexican labor market access, you know. I hope there will be a more reasonable president, you know. But most of the North Americans can relatively easy work in different, between California and New York, there's not a single restriction. Between Canada and the US, there is as well. Of course, they have to overcome that one as well, and that will be a struggle for them if they want to be richer. But you know, this kind of regulatory, massive intervention in the freedom of the people, like you are Albanian, you cannot work in Germany. No! Or Ukrainian only, you know, during the season on the harvests or something like this, yeah? Or Turkey, yeah? This is all completely nonsense and the reason for our lack of prosperity. And it's very striking. And that's the $12 trillion question, I call it. Yeah? Our disunity and our compartmentalization of the European economy leads to this lost $12 trillion every year. It's the GDP loss. And you know, that's really something we have to improve. And it's a powerful vision for the future. Getting richer fast is impossible. But all of us, 700 million Europeans, yeah, including the Turks, including Ukraine, yeah, to be in one market together, in one custom system, and to be much freer, to look for our own future, to work, invest, and prosper, and learn, and educate, and innovate, and build SMEs, or build big companies, yeah, or, you know, also more united with America, obviously, more open. This is 1.2 billion free Western world citizens. And I mean, that's really a very, very powerful vision to have. That was the vision already of Jean Monnet. He made it very clear in all his writings. And that's why the Americans backed him. And he's worked for his time very well. It was the task to unite Western Europe and to make secure it from the communist takeover. Then the unification in the 90s and 2000s worked very good to have the Warsaw Pact countries. Now the task is to have Ukraine and Moldova, Georgia, and the Balkans, ex-Yugoslavia and the ex-Soviet countries. I don't like the term, but to make very clear which countries I mean, you know, to get them into the European trading system, make sure we are much more united, much faster. This is the mission of our founding fathers. This is the mission of Jean Monnet, translated in the year 2020. This is the $12 trillion question. And so please, whatever you can do, whatever we can do together, let's make that happen. Support Ukraine in the European Union. Make sure we have this multifaceted trading system, but as open as possible, with as much opportunity as possible. for people from all the 700 million Europeans, including as well the Turks, the Ukrainians, everybody who is in NATO, in EFTA, in CEFTA, the Customs Union, in ERP, to be much more united, much more freer, much more productive, and much more successful together. That's my wish for the 9th of May 2020. Thanks a lot.